Podcast.
On the left field line, Connor Tate is going to round third. He will score. And rounding third is Blaylock. He will score. And the Dogs walk it off.
If you're looking for the latest Georgia Bulldog news in football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting, then you are in the right place.
It's third down, Bryce Young's career. You need 10, play clock at 4. From the pocket, launching downfield, underthrown and intercepted. Keely Ringo has an escort down the sidelines. All the way to the end zone, and Georgia is going to conquer the Crimson Tide.
Hosted by Jeremiah Stoddard and Jonathan Williams.
Georgia on the mountaintop. Demons be gone, and the drought is over. National champions at long last.
Just sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for these hot takes you're about to listen to.
Welcome back to another episode of Classic City Sports. As always, Jeremiah Stoddard along with Jonathan Williams. It's going to be a good one for you. We have a lot to cover today. Usually, shocker, right?
That we have a lot to cover
every week, it feels like. But the reason we have a lot to cover today is because usually after a game like Kent State, we don't touch it.
All right, yeah.
Like Samford.
Georgia's good.
Yeah. Samford, we didn't touch Samford. Samford was Samford. 33-0. Didn't have anything to say about it, to be honest with you. It kind of expected the same type of thing this week. Well, Kent State had other things planned for us. Yeah, so we actually do have a recap of Kent State, surprisingly enough. Then we're going to talk about some Missouri stuff matchup for this weekend, which, you know, it's Missouri, so you're not expecting a ton there. But it's still, you know, an SEC matchup. So we got some stuff for you there as well. Then, obviously, we got to cover the Classic City Pick'ems and King of the Hill, as always, is a staple segment at this point of the show. So that's what we're getting into. But we're obviously starting with Kent State. There's a lot to go over and unpack from that. So I'm going to kick it to you to start with, Jonathan. Kent State, your immediate reaction. That's how I usually do it with the show is what's your immediate reaction after watching that game? Before you get into the details of why, you know, it was what it was, on Saturday, when you and I were texting back and forth, what was going through your mind? That's what I want to know.
I don't even know that it was – I honestly don't know. I think there was a lot of emotions going on because I'll be honest, watching the game, I was like, Georgia's really not playing that bad, I didn't think. I think a lot of things went wrong that put them in some tough situations that kind of made it seem like things were going bad, which we'll dive into that deeper here in a little bit. But it was more frustrating to watch because I think everybody watching the game knew that this game should not be that close. And
it was a 45-point spread.
They just had a lot of missed opportunities that would have definitely put the game out of reach. I think Georgia would have handled business a lot differently if things had gone a different route, if they didn't have so many different mental lapses throughout the game as well. So it's really more just frustrating to watch because the score really didn't resemble how Georgia was playing, in my opinion. Because, I mean, you look at the score and you're like, oh, wow, they let Kent State score 22 points and they beat them by 17. Georgia was favored by 42, I think, going into Saturday.
It was 45.
That was a tough game for Georgia. Really, I don't know that it really was that bad for Georgia. I don't think they played all that bad, regardless of what this box score in the scoreboard says. I'm going to just turn this on.
Oh, yeah. Let's do that. We did that again, huh?
There we go. We're always due for one throughout the show, so let's go ahead and get out of the way.
A little bit better today.
You can get my skin tone in there now. You can see them glowing.
You can see a little bit of that sunburn from Saturday.
Yeah, we won't talk about that.
Y'all should have seen this man on Saturday after that game. This man had a serious sunburn.
I had a wicked sunburn on my neck.
Yeah. On one half of his neck. The other half was,
you're facing one way watching the game until like the whole time you're just getting burnt on one side.
Yeah, essentially that's what you got from him on that. No, with Kent State on Saturday, I even tweeted something out on this because in the first half, at halftime, I tweeted this. I was like, well, I kind of expect Georgia to take over in the second half because in the first half, all they had was a muff punt and 2 plays offensively. 2 plays. One was that 56-yard, screen pass that that doesn't happen against Georgia. Screenplays don't go that far. Screenplays, you might gain 5 to 10.
Georgia never gives up explosives.
They don't give those screenplays, especially those behind the line of scrimmage plays.
They rally to the football so well
exactly.
all the time.
And so I tweeted out and I was like, there's 3 plays. 2 of them were screenplays that made it kind of big on you. And then 1 was a muffed punt for Ladd. I didn't expect much to happen in the second half. What was concerning to me, Georgia-wise, was, hey, in the second half, they had a 13-play drive against you. They had a 12-play drive against you, and I believe a 9-play drive against you in the second half. Yeah. And Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, only had 3 offensive drives in the second half.
The last time a team did that to Georgia was it was against Mississippi State. I don't know if it was
2019
or
2020.
I can't remember if it was the 2017 matchup or the 2020 matchup.
I think it was 2020.
I think you're right. But yeah,
because that was when JT was
13-play drive that led to points hadn't happened in a year and a half against Georgia. Think about that. So it had been a long time. That's something you never see from Georgia. So yes, those things are a little bit like, okay, that's probably not good.
It caught you off guard.
That's not who Georgia is.
What it was a 50-plus yard. What you're talking about was a 50-plus yard touchdown and a 13-play drive in the same game. Yeah. That's what you're referring to when you talk about Mississippi
State. 2 things that never happened
in the same game. Yeah, and they happened against Kent State. But something that people need to pay attention to with Kent State, going back to a little bit at the end of last season. Last season, Kent State played against Texas A&M on the road, obviously. All these games are going to be on the road because they don't play at home against teams like Georgia, Texas A&M.
Man.
They go play Texas A&M, and then they also played Iowa last year, who they lost to 30-7, but also on the road. And this year, Iowa's hit or miss, but last year they were a pretty good team. And then this year, they've already gone on the road against Oklahoma and UGA. The point of saying that is they are not scared of coming to UGA to play you. They are there knowing what type of team you are. They're used to playing in a hostile environment where they're expected to just get killed. So coming to UGA to play against you is not the same as playing against a Samford, who isn't necessarily there all the time, but they're one of the smaller schools. Think of it like Appalachian State. They go out, they beat these teams. They win these games against Power 5 opponents.
They do it every single year. They sign up for those games every single year. And you have to think, you schedule enough of them. Eventually, you're going to get in a dogfight with somebody. Like App State, they upset Michigan like 10 years ago. They knocked off the number 1 team, and then they just recently beat Texas A&M as well. You get put in those situations enough, eventually you're going to have a dogfight with somebody. It's happened with Georgia Southern one year.
The argument about boxers, is you have a puncher's chance. Basically,
you swing enough times. One of them's going to hit.
One of them, if you catch somebody on the chin one time, all of a sudden it's a fight.
Had a motto in basketball when my senior year was just keep on swinging, man. You keep on swinging, and eventually
hit him in the chin.
Eventually, one of those times is going to hit. And again, you're the number 1 team in the nation, so everybody is going to be pumped up to be playing you. Because like I said this last week, every single team wants to be that team that knocked off the top dog, who was labeled as that team who took Georgia out of the race eventually. Or
you want to be the one that does it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so Kent State isn't going to shy away from potentially upsetting the number 1 team in their own place. Of course they're not going to. But yeah, you sign up for enough of those games, eventually you're going to find yourself in a dogfight. And I don't know that I would classify this one as a dogfight. I know it got to a 1-score game at some points, but Georgia always seemed in control of
Georgia was
game.
Never losing the game.
No.
That's the point. Georgia was never losing the game. You never sat there as a Georgia fan. We were sitting there watching the game. We were texting back and forth. We have a group chat. We were talking to people and stuff in there. And at no point did any of us go, is Georgia going to lose this game? No. Because Georgia was going to win the game. It was, is Georgia going to start looking like Georgia today? Are they going to start making those plays? And my point to that is going to be this. You had no punts. You settled for too many. You settled to too many field goals in the red zone. That was your biggest issue offensively. Your huge issue offensively is you kick too many field goals.
Yep.
You got to stop doing that against these lesser opponents. I don't know what it is, and maybe it's because you run a vanilla offense or whatever is going on. But against Samford and against Kent State, you settled for way too many field goals in the red zone that you normally don't do. Other than that, against Kent State, you had 0 punts. You had an interception, the first interception of the season by Stetson Bennett, and it was a darn good play by the defensive back.
Yeah, Stetson.
He could have thrown it. If you watch the play on TV, the TV copy, all you see is a guy in front of your wide receiver. Mm-hmm. If you watch the all 22, Or if you really, really slow it down and watch the TV copy, you'll notice the defensive back is behind the wide receiver on the route, and he's behind the wide receiver when he makes the break to the middle on the post route. And then when the ball is thrown, he undercuts the receiver and gets underneath it. So he made a good play. Maybe it wasn't the best throw. Maybe, the wide receiver could have made a better play on it, but the defender made a really good play. He undercut the route when he was originally behind the receiver when Stetson threw that ball. I think that's an important detail for people to pay attention to. The other side is Ladd McConkey, who was the one running that route, actually, was Ladd McConkey.
I thought it was Dylan Bell.
Was it Bell?
I think it was Dylan.
I might be wrong. It might be Dylan Bell. I don't know off the top of my head right now. I'm
pretty
questioning.
sure it was Dylan Bell.
But the point of it being, going to Ladd at this point, then you had a muffed punt, which that one, it just was a mistake. It was a mental mistake. You made a bad play because you should have called a fair catch, waved your hand, and been done with it.
I think right now you're dipping into the biggest takeaway from this game is you had 3 turnovers.
Yes.
You played your worst game of the season by far. Absolutely your worst game of the season. And yet you still won by 17 points. And you got out of there with a victory. That is a win every single day of the week. If you play your worst game and you win by 17 points, you'll take that. I don't care who the opponent is. You will always take that. And I think it's also important, or not important, but I think it's also valuable that your worst game happened against Kent State. And it didn't happen. Key. It didn't happen against Tennessee or Kentucky on the road.
Can't afford it against those teams.
Or Florida and Jacksonville. It didn't happen in those moments. It happened against Kent State, where now you have this film and you say, hey, this is where we struggled. This is where we need to get better. This is what happened. And the fact that you had 3 turnovers and your defense got put in tough situations, it seemed like every single time that they were put on the field. Their kicker kicked 100 field goals that game, and he didn't miss a single one of them. So kudos to them for that. But Georgia's defense didn't even play that bad. I mean, they kept them out of the end zone majority of the time, and they withstood their ground in their own territory numerous times and had big stops and keeping them just kicking field goals. So that's a win also there. So like I said, the box score may resemble you thinking, oh, okay, that was a really close game. That's probably not how it should look. And it wasn't. That's not how that game should have looked.
It definitely shouldn't have looked like that.
But at the same time, Georgia still played a pretty decent game, in my opinion. And I think they still look pretty good. And there were still some areas where they were impressive, but Kent State just made some plays and they came ready. And
once again, like I said, Kent State is a team that I'm not going to sit here and go, they're a really good football team. Because they are Kent State for a reason. They're not a powerhouse type program. But like we said earlier in the show, like I was talking about, the teams they've already played Oklahoma, they played Washington, they played Iowa last year, and they played there was one more team I just blanked off the top of my head. But they've played these teams in the past, few months. They are not worried about coming to play against Georgia at home. They're going to come out there and they're going to swing at you. That's what they're going to do.
I mean, those are their biggest games of the year. So, of course, they're not going.
They're ready to go. It is the time for those guys. Think about it. These guys don't get a lot of exposure all the time. It's their chance to play on a national television.
Unfortunately, they got put on ESPN Plus, which shame on ESPN for putting the number 1 team in the nation on ESPN Plus.
This is going to be first, before I even get to this, make sure you subscribe to this video. If you're watching right now,
5 subscribers away from 100. So if you're watching right now, hit that sub button.
Make sure you hit it.
2 seconds.
We're trying to get to that number, that triple digit number. We're almost there. We need your help a little bit. If you're already subscribed, share it with somebody that you know that isn't subscribed.
Just one friend. If everybody in here right now shared it with one friend, we'd
be there. We'd be okay.
100 subs.
Exactly. So we would be good to go. But my point being, this team it's a good team you're playing against in general. But it also ESPN Plus is what we were talking about. Stop putting stuff behind paywalls.
Yeah,
you got to. It's
especially
on ESPN.
The number 1 team in the nation. Put Bandy behind that paywall. All right, make those high dollar graduates pay for that. All right, don't make the number 1 team in the nation.
There was an article. There was something that came out that this was the highest. I was
about to say that, and that's
highest
news.
view. It is terrible news. Highest viewed ESPN Plus game in history.
That's not good news.
It's terrible news because that means they're going to start doing it more. And the problem was they did the number 1 team in the nation that way. And so, of course people watch because the number 1 team in the nation's got their specific fans are going to watch that game, whether or not they have to do it. And whether or not that's what they don't seem to understand is they'll watch it and then they'll probably cancel ESPN Plus the next week if they don't need it.
Another crazy stat I saw this week. So they released the time for the Auburn game, which is at 3:30. And so they're releasing some
CBS.
Of the future schedules.
You get one more game on CBS probably, by the way.
Since 2010, UGA has had 52 noon games. 52 of them. For context, Ole Miss has had 37. Bama has had, I think, 14. And another school, I can't remember which one, had around 35 or 34. 52 noon games for UGA in 12 years. That is insane. Oh, Brent.
That's insane. I'm putting
Brent,
this on the
you
screen
are a
right now.
real one. This is the kind of loyalty we need. Look, Brent,
listen,
we
if you've got a
appreciate you.
significant other, Dan, I see you in the chat right now. If your wife isn't subscribed to this channel and you haven't made her do it yet, that's on you.
I know Cannon's on his phone right now, Dan. Go tell him to get on YouTube real quick.
You've got 2
Hit the
kids
sub
and
button.
a wife. Are all of y'all subscribed?
Dan alone could get us to 100 subscribers right now. But
That's all I'm
Brent,
saying.
we really appreciate you for that one. You are a real one.
Hey, listen, if she's a Brent, I'm talking to you again. If she's a tech fan and she subscribes to us,
we'll take
I'll
it.
appreciate it.
we'll
We'll
take it
educate
upon
her
her-
on
yeah,
some
exactly.
stuff, okay?
We'll
And then we'll be talking to her come November when Georgia plays
We'll
Tech.
take it upon ourselves to bring her to the other side.
We got
and
you.
make UGA more appealing to her. That's what we'll take. If you do that for us, if you get her to sub, we'll take it upon ourselves to help you out in that area and get her to cheer on for the Dogs for you. That way, there's no more friction in the household in November when that game rolls around. So
Exactly. Well, and to kind of wrap everything up, once again, it was not a great game against Kent State this weekend, but you had 3 turnovers and you haven't turned the ball over all season long. You had a muffed punt that was just a mental lapse. And my coach, when I used to play ball back in the day, was, hey, you can make physical errors. They happen. Mental errors are what we can't excuse, and that's what you can't do. And that's what, Ladd had a mental error by not calling a fair catch and having a muffed punt. Outside of that, everything else was physical errors that happened in that game. You had once again, the Stetson Bennett interception was a really good play by the defensive back. Yeah, he could have maybe made a little bit better of a throw, but it was a really good play by the defensive back. The fumble by Ladd, as Brooks Austin said on his channel on Monday in the mistakes that Georgia made against Kent State, fumbles happen. Good football players fumble the ball. It happens. All it takes is one guy to get his fist in there, punch it out, and it's over with. You cannot always avoid fumbles. That's a physical error. They happen. It is what it is. You get 3 of those in one game. Like Jonathan said a little bit ago, at least it happened against Kent State, and it didn't happen against Tennessee at home. It didn't happen on the road against Kentucky.
There's a lot of good.
It didn't happen against Florida. That's the takeaway.
there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad to take away from that game. Both things are going to help you. They're only going to help you moving forward, and especially moving forward into Missouri this week for the Week 5 matchup. And Missouri's, oh man, this
is true too. She watches every single week.
She is a top fan.
She is. She might have a little bit of a bias to the show, but she at least watches every week and she comments every week.
This is how much of a true friend Morgan is. Even Brooks gave her a shout out on his own show, on his own network.
He did.
So that just tells you everything. Zach, we know that you're a true fan, bro. You're always hooking us up. Get that whole family to subscribe.
Zach is also always interacting on Twitter.
He's on time. He's in here for the entirety of the video.
And he's always on Twitter. Every time we post anything, he's under the comments or he's doing stuff, which you see the Twitter handles right here. Go hit us up on there as well. We care mostly, subscribing to the YouTube channel, but Twitter also, we post everything on there about different updates and everything that's going on. Or we might have, little funny videos to post or different things that are going on through the week that we might get that you're missing if you're not following us on Twitter. But anyways, going back to it.
Yeah, so I did some digging this week on the matchup history with Missouri and whatnot because, I'm a stat guy. I'm looking at all the numbers, and I have some stats I'm going to bring to you guys
our stat guru
here in a little bit. But you look at the matchup history, there's been 11 total games played between Georgia and Missouri. The first one being in 1960 for the Orange Bowl, which Georgia won, I believe, 17-0. And then the next one wasn't played until 2012, 2011 when they joined the SEC. 12. And Missouri has won one game. That one game being the year where Georgia, it seemed like, had 50 injuries on their squad. That's when both all of our running backs were out. We had
they won the East the first 2 years they were here, basically.
Was it the first two?
They won twice, did they not?
I can't remember.
Somebody in the comments.
I know they won it once.
Did they not win the SEC East twice?
I think you're right.
Between 2012
so that's what I was getting into, though, is that Missouri came into the SEC, and they were actually a pretty decent team. They weren't a slouch. And then now, I mean, they're bottom tier SEC. They're
Vandy level.
They
are Vandy.
That's pretty steep.
You can say what you want. They are Vandy level. Are they not Vandy level?
I don't know if they're that bad.
They're current Vandy level. Vandy's actually got 3 wins this year. How many wins does Missouri have this year?
That's a pretty strong statement. But Like
They're
that
not
game they
good.
had against Auburn
not
last week,
good.
that's the toilet bowl of the SEC right now. Those two teams are both
Auburn
really
is
struggling.
also really bad
Yeah,
this
they
year.
are really, really bad. They're struggling. So
I'm surprised Auburn versus Georgia is a 3:30 CBS
it's
game.
Deep South's oldest rivalry. Like that's just a
CBS,
sympathy.
that is the doubleheader that day. So I guess they were like, "Oh, give Auburn and Georgia the game. We're going
It's
to go
the
with
same
the 8
reason
p.m. game that night."
why Georgia and Florida are always going to be at that time slot. It's you can't.
That's literally every single year. Though.
That's what I'm
already-
saying, though.
Before the
that's a
schedule's
game-
announced, everyone knows
that's
that
a-
game's 3:30.
That's a rivalry that you just have to put in that time slot. I mean, there's a lot of history between the two. There's a lot of hate between the two. So you're always going to put it there. So Georgia comes into this week against Missouri as a 26-point favorite. And there are three stats. Let me pull out my phone so I can read these off for you that I thought were pretty interesting. And I think these three stats are going to be kind of correlate to what will be key for Georgia if they want to really succeed against Auburn. And all three of them correlate together, and I think they're going to play a big part on Saturday. So here you go. Sacks allowed for Missouri. They rank 56th in the nation, average 2 per game. I know. Doesn't sound like a lot. 2 sacks a game. Really not that much, considering all things. Here are the next two. Passing yards, 95th amongst all FBS teams, averaging 209.8 passing yards a game. And the last one, third down conversions. This is the big one. 78th in the nation amongst all FBS teams, only converting at 37% of the time on third down. And the reason why I say all three of these things tie together, sacks allowed. You get to the quarterback, that increases your chances of putting in third and longs, and that pushes their chances of being in obvious passing downs, which they aren't very good at. Their passing game is not very strong right now, and Georgia has a really strong secondary as well, so that plays into Georgia's hand as well. Also, teams against Georgia's defense are only converting on third down at like 28% of the time right now. So not going to be a good day at the office for Missouri if they're living and dying by third down. And so if you get them the third down, you're already in good situation if you're Georgia. So make them pass the ball, which you do that by getting them into third and longs, obvious passing downs. And, man, if they're having to live and die, like I said, by converting on third downs, it's not going to be very pretty for Missouri. So those are the three key stats that I think heading into this week are pretty telling for Georgia. I think that's going to put them in a good spot because although Georgia doesn't have a lot of sacks, what they do is they get consistent pressure on the quarterback, which is why, again, sacks are overrated, man. They are because
pressure is what matters.
People scheme around that for Georgia. They know that rush is going to be coming. So
they get the ball out quick.
So,
and if they get the ball out quick, it kind of screws you up. By the way, the reason I put this back up on the bottom of the channel right now is because this man tweeted this out today, by the way.
I did.
Those stats that he just read off, that you would know those stats if you follow him on Twitter. So that's why I put that on the bottom of the screen there because that's important. He does this, a few times a week. For a while during the offseason, when there was not as much going on, he was putting one out. He had a daily stat that he would give you. And it was stuff like that. He really digs in. That's why I call him our stat guru because he comes back with all that kind of stuff all the time.
He does. I really do. And sometimes I put in a lot of effort for him. These, that's just kind of doing some basic research. But sometimes I go pretty in-depth in there.
He digs deep into the bag sometimes.
I try to, man.
He does.
So, anyways, those are the three stats that I think. So passing yards, 209.8 average. Third down conversion rates are not looking good for Missouri. And then also sacks allowed. Get after the quarterback. And Brady Cook, which is Missouri's quarterback, he's known to kind of scramble around, but Georgia does a really good job at rallying around the football. And if you can contain him, if you can get him onto the ground and refrain him from making plays outside of the pocket with his feet, Georgia's going to be in good shape with this game. So those are the three things. And they're all predicated around defense. And Georgia's defense, aside from this last week, has looked pretty strong. So
yeah, absolutely. I will say that, but that's what I was going to bring up too about Missouri, and I have it pulled up right here as well, was, Missouri's scoring 28 points a game and allowing 24.5 points a game. And Georgia does have one of the best offenses in the game right now at 42.3 points per game. Still, even after last week where they allowed 22 points, was that 22?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the score.
Yes, 22.
So 22 points, even though they allowed 22 points, they're still only allowing 8 points a game. Guys, I can tell you this right now. Missouri's not going to go out there and have multiple 10-plus play drives against Georgia next week.
No.
And the reason I say that is because I promise you that Kirby Smart absolutely lit a fire under these guys.
He got all the ammo he needed. All right.
Well, he's been talking about this whole time about simulating adversity.
Yeah. And that's hard to do when you're just mollywopping
It's
everybody.
real hard to simulate, but
it's so hard.
It's not just hard to simulate it. It's hard. You're kind of speaking upon deaf ears when you say, hey, when they hit you in the mouth, and every single week you're killing people.
That's something that Georgia is going to have to get used to and learn how to deal with because for the past 40 years, the adversity has been not winning a national championship and not beating Alabama. Now that those two things are cleared, you're kind of trying to figure out where can we dig deep, or not dig deep, but where can we find our adversity? What can we find that keeps us motivated, So that's kind of something that Georgia's, I think, still learning how to get used to, and finding areas of, we got to find somewhere else that just ignites that fire under us, and we feel like we have something to prove every single week, especially now because people are just glamoring over Georgia. They are in love with the University of Georgia right now.
At least they were before last week.
At least before last. But even still, they're still the number one team. So people aren't not believers in Georgia anymore just because of one game. They still believe in them. They still think they're the best team in the nation. So I think that's just finding your motivation is something that Georgia's going to have to kind of readjust, reevaluate.
Yeah, it's going to take a little bit. I think this week was enough to really tell you, hey, we do have some areas to improve on. And once again, it goes upon deaf ears when you're hearing Kirby Smart tell you every single week, hey, you got problems. Here's your problems, there, and there. And you're blowing people out by 40 points a game.
Yeah.
And they're going, I mean, we're good. Don't worry about it. We're good.
They may be
we're not stressed.
But they're not hurting us, maybe.
They're not hurting us, exactly. All of a sudden this week against a team like Kent State that you're expecting to really just blow away,
yep.
All of a sudden they're in a game in the fourth quarter. It's a 10-point game. That's a problem. And it genuinely is a problem at that point in time. You can't get to a fourth quarter and have a real football game against a Kent State. Now, at the end of the day, they won by 17, and they were able to take care of it. But, that's one of those things that going into this matchup against Missouri, that's why I think the spread's 28 this week against Missouri. And I would say I think Georgia's probably going to cover, and the reason I say they're going to cover is because they're going to come out swinging. And they are going to make sure – this is what I've learned about Georgia. Against the two teams that have been like inferior opponents, like genuine inferior opponents, being Kent State and Samford, they kicked a lot of field goals in the red zone. Once again, I said this earlier, maybe it's because of a vanilla offense and stuff like that against those teams.
It's hard to know from a fan standpoint.
Maybe they're not running all kinds of crazy schemes in the red zone against these teams. But what they did against South Carolina – y'all remember how many field goals they kicked against them?
Which is so funny to me because it's been the two cupcakes that Georgia has struggled against the most. But then you go against
I'm telling you, I think it's a game plan.
I know. Or against Oregon and South Carolina, it's like, holy cow, like who is stopping
this team? Yeah, you win by 46 one game and you win by 41 the other game.
But now that you're in the meat of your schedule now, like it's SEC
at this point
opponents,
it is. Yeah.
From here on out, aside from later on in the schedule when you got Georgia Tech.
You play...
And then you have one more.
One more is Georgia Tech. That's it. Because you had your out-of-conference games was Oregon, Samford, Kent State, and Georgia Tech. That's your four.
So from here on out, it's just SEC opponents. So I think this is really where you find out who Georgia is. And it starts on Saturday where you're finally – I know you already played South Carolina and you already played Oregon, but I think from here on out is where you really get a good evaluation of where Georgia stands in the SEC. And if they are, like we had said for the first 3 weeks, if they are just that much better than everybody else, and if they are without
that was
the best team
week,
in the nation.
Our title last week is Georgia that much better than everybody else. And this week we come back and say, hey, they got some areas to improve. That's what you do.
Exactly. So, and I'll end my Missouri conversation on this. There's 3 players that I think are to watch for Georgia. So 3 players that you need to watch this weekend heading into Missouri. 3 simple ones. They're not going to blow your mind by any means, but I think there's still value of knowing these 3 players for certain reasons, not just because it's my opinion, but because there's certain things that back up these statements, if you ask me. So first one's Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey's been one of the most consistent players for Georgia, and A.D. Mitchell is looking like he's going to be held out again this week against Missouri. Again, you don't want to rush a guy like that back. Give him time while you can. So I think they're going to rest him again this week, which means Ladd McConkey is going to be, again, the focal point of your receiving corps aside from Brock Bowers. And the ball's going to keep coming his way. I know that he struggled against Kent State, but the ball's going to keep coming his way, and he's been so consistent. He's been so good for Georgia, and I don't see him having another Kent State-type game. I think he's going to bounce back in a big way. So that's why I'm saying Ladd McConkey. Second one, Malachi Starks. Brady Cook, Missouri's quarterback, is averaging an interception per game. Malachi Starks already has 2 on the season. He's a ball hawk back there. He makes plays on the football while it's still in the air. I think Malachi Starks is going to come down with an interception this week. I think he's going to have a big game for Georgia. That secondary in general for Georgia has played really, really solid. But Malachi Starks specifically, I think, is going to be a key player for Georgia on Saturday. And I think he's going to come away with an interception, maybe even 2. Who knows? And then the last one, Jamon Dumas-Johnson. He had a huge week last week. He had 2 sacks, a tackle for loss, and I think 8 total tackles for Georgia. Really solid game against Kent State for Jamon Dumas-Johnson. But it goes even further for him. Last year, he actually got some playing time as a freshman against Missouri, and he got a sack, and along with 5 total tackles, I want to say, against Missouri last year. So I'm expecting Jamon Dumas-Johnson to have another big game. He's another guy that he hunts the ball. He has a nose for the football, and this is a big game for that. Like I said, Brady Cook likes to scramble around in the pocket. He's going to be a guy that has to contribute in containing him in the pocket, getting him down to the ground. So those are the 3. Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Malachi Starks, and Ladd McConkey. I think those are 3 players that you guys should watch heading into this week
and how I'm going to end my part on it is I'm going to really focus on like one specific player and kind of like the outlook from fans' perspective type stuff as well. And I'm gonna double down on what you're saying about Ladd. The reason I'm going to do that is because the first half was where he had his bad game. He had a really, really bad first half. And then you saw a quote that came out from Stetson Bennett this week where he said, hey, I went up and talked to him after the first half, all this stuff. And I said, hey, I'm going to keep going to you.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to make these plays. Like, I know you're going to snap back out of this. I'm going to keep going to you, so be ready for it. Get out of it and be ready to go. In the second half, he started making plays for you, right? And then from a fan's perspective, you got to be the guy that's watching the game. And I understand we're all fans. You call yourself a fan of the team. Fan is short for fanatic, as Brooks loves to say, and I'm wearing his shirt tonight, by the way. And fan is short for fanatics. So yeah, fanatic means you're crazy. You love the team so much that you're kind of crazy about it, that kind of thing. Refrain from saying like F this player or this guy sucks. That kind of stuff. Like I don't care if you're on social media, you're in a group text, you're in a private chat, all these different things. Don't go out there and talk so like bad about a specific player to that point. You can say, hey, dang, he really messed that up. That sucks. But going out and saying this player sucks or this kind of that, like you got to give the guy a break because this is a guy that's been out there and, all last season, he was crucial for you. First few games this year, he's crucial for you. First 3 games this season. So what is that? 18 games? He played 12 last year and 3 the first this year. And he has been so good for you. He has 1 bad game. Man, don't go screw this player. That's just, I lose. I don't want to talk to you too much after that. Like, because that's rough.
Well, it's just like we make mistakes every day in our lives. We're just not ridiculed from them because nobody's
You're not
watching
on national
us
TV
all the time on
thousands,
national,
100,000 people in the stands basically watching you.
Our job
and then
is
millions of people watching.
Our job is not viewed upon millions of people every single week. So people aren't like we may have one person that ridicules us or a boss that tells us where we need to get better or whatnot. But we are not just sitting. We're not on TV every single week for millions of people to ridicule us. So think of it in that perspective as well. And especially for a player like Ladd, who's done so many good things to this program. He played a big role in Georgia winning a national championship. So, but I'll also add this. Last year, Georgia had a lot of success with the deep ball against Missouri. Arian Smith and Jermaine Burton specifically came up with some big plays for Georgia. Ladd McConkey is going to be in that role for Georgia on Saturday. So, again, I think there's a really big window of opportunity for Ladd McConkey to just have a massive game for Georgia on Saturday. And I think he will. I think he's going to bounce back in a big way.
He really will. I do think that's the case too, and I'm excited to see what he does this week. And I'm expecting him to kind of shush everybody, kind of thing, and say, "Hey, by the way, it was a bad day. It is what it is. We're moving forward. Georgia's going to have a good game this coming Saturday. Ladd's going to have a good game this Saturday. There's a couple other games this year or this season, or I'm going way out and stuff. This specific week that you should pay attention to, and that's going to take us into Classic City Sports." The Classic City Pick'ems. And I'm going to start with you. You've got a couple games. I'm going to let you get your first one, then I'll take the next one as well.
Which one do I want to debut first?
You tell me. I'm waiting for you. Go with the other one. Don't go with the second one. You know which one I'm talking about. Save that for last.
All right. I'll go with my first one, which I was surprised to see this team as an underdog because but at the same time, I guess I get it. But Wake Forest is a 7-point underdog against FSU. Going into this week, both teams are ranked. Wake Forest is 22, I want to say, and FSU is 23. And Wake Forest is coming off of a heartbreak loss against Clemson in overtime. They were so close to knocking them off, but that was a really close game. And that's why I was kind of shocked to see Wake Forest an underdog in this game because I think FSU has definitely improved this year. I think they look like one of the better teams that they've had in recent years because they've been horrible for about a 5-year stretch now. So I think they're better, But I really like Sam Hartman. I like the Fighting Deacons in this one, and I especially like them as a 7-point underdog against FSU. I think Wake Forest is going to take that dub, but I'll at least take them as a 7-point underdog in that game. So the first one, taking Wake Forest as a 7-point underdog against the Seminoles.
It's a good game. Wake Forest was in a nail biter against Clemson this past week.
And it is hard to bounce off of an emotional loss like that. But at the same time,
overtime loss.
Yeah, but Wake Forest is a pretty good football
team. My point of saying that, though, is they scored a lot of points last week against Clemson. And Clemson is supposed to have a good defense.
I don't know that FSU can hang in a dogfight like that where
I don't think they have the defense to kind of hang in like that.
I don't know they have the offense either.
They've scored a decent number of points. They just haven't been able to I don't think that they can get into that type of game.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think they can get into that type of game. My first one that I have is Washington versus UCLA -3. And if you look at the base part of it, right? Like,
you're a big Pac-12 guy.
Some of these games, and I'll explain why, though. Like, listen, I've kind of focused on the Pac-12 in general because it kind of surprised me. We've talked so much about UCLA, Oregon, and Utah this year, right? Well, UCLA is 4-0, and you're going, wait, that's I didn't realize that. Well, they're 4-0. They've played hold on. Who am I looking at? Wrong one. They've played Colorado, decent football team, not a great.
Colorado is one of the worst football teams.
But when I get
they're bad.
I mention them right now because of the other teams in my name behind them.
Colorado is bad.
They're okay. I'm saying okay.
They're bad.
Listen, the other teams they played is South Alabama, Alabama State, and Bowling Green.
Hey, now don't be throwing strays at Bowling Green, all right? My fiance's
That's the 4 teams they played.
That's where my fiance's parents are from, all right? Go
That's
Falcons.
Fine. That's fine, and you can hope for the best for them. But that doesn't make them a good football team.
I'm fighting for you, Wayne. I'm fighting for you right now. I'm fighting for you.
My point, though, is that's their 4 wins. So I was looking at it. I was like, I didn't realize they were 4-0. That's why I didn't realize they were 4-0, because of who they played. They haven't popped up on your radar. And Washington, so like when you think of that and you go, hey, they've scored 41.8 points a game. They've only allowed 8 points per game, and they have 500 yards of offense per game. Yeah, but look at who they played. That's why I say that 3-point spread, when you're looking at a team like of Washington, who has played Stanford, Mississippi State, and that's the 2 big ones. They also played Kent State this year already, by the way, and they beat them by 25. So Washington's a decent football team.
Yeah, Washington's
a 3-point spread against a team that have played the 4 teams that I've said right there, to me, is they really looked at the points per game. I'm serious. 44 points per game for Washington, 41.8 for UCLA. And they were like, it's about a 3-point game. And they put it on there, not paying attention to who they're playing. I think that's a really Bowling Green over USC. Yeah. There you go. I feel you, Zach. I'm with you. I'm riding with you.
Wayne's my fiance's grandpa, by the way. He was a big Bowling Green fan, alumni and stuff. So that's why I said that earlier.
I'm with you. Hey, no disrespect to Bowling Green.
I was just filling in everybody else.
No disrespect to Bowling Green. I'm just saying that if you were to put them against pretty much anybody, you're not going to feel too confident. Right. So that's my point. So that's my first team, Washington versus UCLA -3.
All right, this last one I was on the fence because I don't have a good history of picking against this team, and I don't like picking against this team in general. But I'm going to stand by what I've said on previous episodes on this channel and what I have pounded and I'm not
so sure about
and
this
who
one.
I stay loyal to. And I'm going with Arkansas as a 17.5-point underdog against Alabama this weekend. I know Alabama's a really good football team, but I also think Arkansas is a pretty solid football team as well. And I've said I'm a big believer in Sam Pittman. I think he has that football program at a really good spot, especially compared to where they were when he originally got there. And I have a hard time picturing Alabama beating them more than 17 points. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they do beat them by 17 points. But I'm riding with my guy Sam Pittman, and I just think 17.5 points is a lot, especially for an SEC matchup where Arkansas is looking like potentially the second best team in the West right now. I know they just lost to Texas A&M off of a ball hitting on the top of the upright. I mean,
2 plays in that game. You had to play a ball that the last one that would have given them the lead, in spite of everything else. Ball hits the top of the right upright and bounces straight back.
Which is more impressive than making a field goal, honestly.
You couldn't do that again if you tried to. You really couldn't.
I think, baseball, a ball hits the foul pole, it's a home run. Maybe in football, you hit the upright. Just go ahead and give them the field goal, maybe. I don't know.
Different rules on there. But the other play was KJ Jefferson trying to dive from the 4-yard line. And he fumbles. And then not only does he fumble, Texas A&M picks it up, runs about 20 yards, and all of a sudden he's about to go down and pitches it to another guy, and he takes it the other 80 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two plays that just don't happen. They don't happen.
Yeah,
and then that's how Arkansas
I'm riding
loses
with
that
Sam
game.
Pittman and the Hogs, baby. I'm going to ride the 17.5 points with them. And so that's my last pick. I might end up regretting it, but you got to go big or go home. And what's not some fun in this? You can't be picking boring games all the time or the gimmies all the time.
Game. It's a good game.
So
I
picked fun with Arkansas and
I
Alabama.
picked Texas A&M and Arkansas last week.
Yeah,
that was a close game.
Mm-hmm.
My next one is going to be Minnesota. What is this? I think it's 12.5 against Purdue.
Gosh,
Minnesota.
I kind of have a thing where I don't touch the Big Ten. Because there was a few Big Ten games where I was like, all right, maybe I roll with these. But like Michigan and Iowa. Michigan's an 11.
See, I'm not touching that game.
Michigan is an 11-point favorite
Not touching
over
that.
Iowa. And I've been on this channel slandering Iowa.
I looked at that one actually with Iowa. I looked at that game when we were looking at it today. I looked at that game and I said, I'm
Big
good.
Ten games are notorious for just being these horrible, just boring games that end up being like a final score of 17-10, and everyone's like, oh dang, the Big Ten's good at defense. They got some good defenses out there. Really, it's just that both teams suck that day. And so I stay away from Big Ten games because they're way too unpredictable, and the Big Ten's just garbage for the most part. And those are the type of games that I don't want to mess with.
Well, let me explain why.
Okay.
The reason why being you got Minnesota out here scoring 45 points a game, only allowing 6 points a game. Purdue is scoring 36 a game and allowing 23.3 points per game.
Okay.
It's a big difference as far as their production on both sides of the ball. And so that's why I think 12.5, I think they're going to hold up. Yeah, it's Big Ten, and Minnesota is, they've been in the top 10 top 25 a few times in the past couple of years. They're currently ranked 21st. Purdue is just one of those teams that never, ever, ever takes the next step. And I think that
they're the spoiler makers for a reason because they're really
they literally spoil games.
They're really never in contention for anything, but boy, oh boy, will they ruin your season in a heartbeat.
They might. And they might screw me up on this. And I kind of hesitated on this because 12.5 points is a little bit out of what I usually like to pick. That's kind of high. At least I'm not picking 17 or 23 for Nevada. But I'm just saying 12.5 is a little bit outside of my comfort zone for the most part. But I do think that, with a team scoring almost 46 points a game and only allowing 6 points a game, I think they should be able to handle it.
You have fun watching that game on Saturday. I would rather watch underwater basket weaving for 24 hours and watch Big Ten noon kickoff or whatever the heck they want to.
I don't even know what time that game is. Hold on. That game is at 12. It's on ESPN2 at 12.
And it's going to be a rock fight. And there's going to be a winner, but really nobody wins in those games.
Yeah, that's the first game I'll be lubricating myself a little bit that day too. Chill. I will be drinking a little bit to get myself going at that point in time. You stop. But 12.5 points. Keep up with me at about noon because you'll see me tweeting. If you can keep up with the socials, I'll put them back.
Lord, if you're tweeting about Purdue and Minnesota, it's a bad day on the timeline, brother. That's a bad day on the timeline.
It'll be happening right here.
But aside from the Big Ten being mood killers on game day, there's a lot of other things that just kill the mood.
I forgot we had one more segment.
Yeah, brother, we got King of the Hill, man. We always finish it off with King of the Hill. We have for the last 4 months, and we're ending it just like we always have, or just like we recently started doing.
Past few months, let's go.
It's the biggest mood killers of game day. I think there's a lot of things that kind of kill the mood. Like I said, Big Ten football being one of them. Unless aside from the Ohio State Michigan matchup, aside from that one game, but. So tell me some things that there's so much even if Georgia isn't playing necessarily because, bye weeks, there's still a lot to love about college football and just something about game day every single weekend of getting to watch football from noon to midnight, midnight madness going on and just 3:30 games, primetime games, whatever. There's a lot of beautiful things about college football, but there's also some things that just absolutely kill the mood. So what are those things for you? Aside from losing, by the way, because losing, everybody hates losing.
And first of all, Zach, you do this on game day, and you tell me how it goes.
You find out for us. How about
I'm not doing that again.
We're not doing any further research on that.
Nope, already figured out. And secondly, Dan, we're still waiting. It's been like a month at this point, and you have a chip. We're waiting for you. Just holding off on that. No, but my mood, you know what kills a mood for me on game day? Having to go to a wedding.
Oh yeah, that's got to be top 2 on the list, right?
I have a second wedding this football season that takes me on a Saturday that I have to go to in October. And it is what it is. I'm going to go, but that'll kill a mood because you can't watch anything. This one, at least, last one I was in the wedding, so it really took up my whole day. This next one, I'm just going to the wedding. So I'll try to watch, something. Maybe I'll watch some of the noon game because the wedding's at like 4. I'll watch the noon game, and then hopefully I can get home at a good time and I can watch, a late night game or something like that.
Friends just suck, don't they? Friends just suck, don't they? Sometimes. Gosh,
that's not my friend. It was my wife's friend. It's my wife's friend. This one. This one's my wife's friend. Right. So it's her fault. But that definitely kills a mood on a Saturday. Right. And don't schedule them. If you're out there, if you're going to get married, you're getting married soon. Well, you're engaged. You're going to get married in the next year or 2. I love you, but if you invite me to a wedding,
you ain't gotta worry about it.
I'm telling you right now on air, if you invite me to a wedding in the fall,
it ain't gonna happen
during football season.
It ain't gonna happen.
I may or may not show up.
Look at that.
Just saying.
She said it for me. We won't get married on a game day. She already knows what's up. Trust me. I've been working on this.
Thank you, Morgan.
6.5 years.
Then if I get an invite to your wedding, I'll come as long as it's not.
Why do you think I went ahead and locked that one down, brother? She knows what's up.
Good call.
So I'm going with the other one that's got to be in the top 2. It's running out of beer. You run out of, you go, like, and it's the worst because, like, if you have, like, a noon game or earlier kickoff, and it might get a little stressful, so you're drinking more than you typically do, and you finally get out of it, it's like, oh, all right, got the rest of my evening now, just kick back, watch some more football. You reach in the cooler, you're just digging for ice. That's it. There's nothing else in the cooler. Nobody there should probably be going to the store and driving to get more beer, and it just kills the mood. So that's my other one. So
I'm with you on that because what was it, 2 weeks ago, I think, or a couple weeks ago. Maybe it wasn't 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah, it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, I ran out of beer after a game, and I was like, dang, that's not good.
Nope.
It's not good. And what that makes you do is, one, either somehow figure out a way to get to a store and buy more beer, or at my house, I always have liquor too.
Next thing you know, you're on your phone. Can I DoorDash alcohol to my house? That's where that puts you in life. That's not a good place to be.
My issue is I may have had, a handful of beers at that point. And then if I obviously am not going to drive to a store because I'm going to be responsible at that point, I always have liquor at my house.
Ooh.
And that is not a good combination.
Then you're really just going down a deep slope.
It is not good. And that is a bad call after you've been drinking for a while. And all of a sudden you pull out a bottle of bourbon, and that's all you got left.
I'll tell you the other.
It ends up being a rough morning the next day.
I'll tell you the other mood killer, and I think I think everybody has this guy in their group, in their game day group that they watch with or whatever, and it's regardless of if the game went perfect, there was nothing to complain about. Like you won 58-0, the offense looked great, the defense looked great, and then there's just always this guy in the group that has to say something negative at the end of the game. And then everybody's going at each other, telling each other, you don't know what you're talking about. Why you even got to bring that up? Like last year, I think a lot of that was, well, Stetson Bennett still can't get the job done. Like no matter how many times Georgia won.
So many people last year.
I think that was the big argument last year. But every fan base.
Rudes, you're right.
Yes. The Kevin of the group. That's what we'll call it. Everybody's got a Kevin.
Everybody's got a Kevin.
Everybody's got a Kevin that gets on their nerves. And just no matter what, they have something negative to say. And they just want to stir the pot a little bit, get everybody riled up for no reason. Everybody could be in a good mood, and they just got to stir that pot and get everybody going. That's another mood killer because then everybody's just kind of at each other's throats for the rest of the day. And it's just kind of a vibe killer,
Absolutely. And that's what you don't want on there.
No.
I'm going to put it up one more time. As you can see across the bottom of the screen, make sure you guys follow us on social media if you are on Twitter and everything like that. And then also, if you haven't already and you're watching right now, make sure you like this video as you're watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Most people watching probably have. But like I said earlier, if you know somebody that, likes Georgia football and enjoys to listen to guys just kind of spew off some nonsense for about 45 minutes.
Away now.
We gained one since we've been talking today. Someone
did their job.
Somebody came through already. So make sure y'all do that.
Away. You should be one of those 4 if you're not already. Help us out. Help us get to 100. Yeah, started pretty much just did my job.
I kind of did it.
Took my job away from me of plugging all the socials and whatnot. So he did everything.
No, so you do my part. Go ahead.
Oh my gosh.
Go ahead.
Put on the spot right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll gotta prepare myself. As always, guys, keeping it classy in the Classic City. We'll catch you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Classic City Sports. Take a second to subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to reach out to the Classic City Sports Crew on Twitter with any topics you'd like discussed. You can reach out to Jeremiah at The Stodfather, to Jonathan at Dr._J Will, and make sure to follow at Classic City Pod for show updates. Check back next week for a brand new episode. In the meantime,
2 simple words which express the sentiments of the entire Bulldog Nation.